It's one of the most common genetic disorders in the United States. So why do some battling the illness question if they've been forgotten? Coming up on Need to Know, the fight to survive, to improve treatment, to raise funding, and to educate, all in the name of sickle cell. We'll hear from those fighting the disease and from those in the medical field trenches just ahead. Also on the show, the incumbents in the race for Rochester City School Board explain why they want 4 more years. But will it be enough to help bring needed change to the district? Don't go anywhere. Need to Know starts right now. Sickle cell, that's a word you've likely heard, but don't know much about. It's a disease that just might impact someone you know, in the office, in the classroom, or in your neighborhood. But you probably wouldn't be able to tell. Why? Because sickle cell is a disease that doesn't necessarily show wear and tear on the outside, but on the inside, it can do significant damage. Damage that can lead to death. But in New York State and in our region, work is underway to breathe new life into efforts that would improve the prevention of complications and treatment of sickle cell disease. Joining me to discuss these efforts and what you need to know about sickle cell is Dr. Susie Norona, director of the Sickle Cell Transition Center at UR Medicine's Golisano Children's Hospital. Lloyd Davis, a sickle cell survivor and student at MCC, and Lloyd's mother, Simone Stevens, an advocate for sickle cell disease. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for being here. So Dr. Norona, I will start with you. For those who don't know, what is sickle cell and why do some with the disease feel that they have been forgotten?
So sickle cell disease is an inherited disorder that affects mostly African Americans, although there are people of Mediterranean descent, Indian, and Middle Eastern descent who are affected. And it's a genetic disorder that causes the production of abnormal hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is what makes red blood cells red and carries oxygen throughout the body. And the problem in sickle cell disease is that hemoglobin becomes misshapen, and that causes the red blood cell to change into the so-called sickle shape, or C shape. And that shape doesn't flow through blood vessels very well, and it becomes blocked in the smaller blood vessels as well as larger blood vessels. And the problem with problems in the blood is that blood flows throughout the body, and so it can affect every single organ, starting from the brain, the eyes, all the way down to the gallbladder, the liver, the heart, among other things. And unfortunately, this can happen throughout life. It's really a chronic illness, and it primarily causes pain, acute pain and chronic pain. And children start from very young age to have to cope with this, and they learn how to cope and become functional, but in doing so, they may not appear ill. And so they have to find some way to explain to schools, and as they grow older, their employers, why they're not able to go to their jobs or attend school. And it's hard to explain a disease that really doesn't show on the surface most of the time.
And for those who say some have told me they feel as though they've been forgotten, why are some saying that?
Well, part of the reason is that it is a relatively rare disease, and so people don't necessarily know about it. And if you don't know about it, then it's hard to know what accommodations to make for people who suffer from it. And unfortunately, if you don't receive those accommodations, then you may be disadvantaged when it comes to schooling or when it comes to employment.
Lloyd, as a young person fighting sickle cell, talk to me a little bit about how it has directly impacted your life, perhaps in ways that people watching may not realize or may not think about.
Growing up, I guess, school-wise, I oftentimes ended up missing a lot of days of school. So learning in class was pretty hard. I'm not gonna hold, but for the most part, I would be back and forth between school and the hospital, and I would have a hard time gathering concepts that everyone else was learning in class, so I would have to take notes and try my best to stay up. And that's really all you really could do, is try to keep up with everyone else. It's a constant game of catch-up.
People watching right now, and they see you, they look at you and say, he looks healthy, he looks vibrant. Was it a challenge for you to have to explain sometimes to your peers and to your teachers what was going on?
Yeah, a lot of people couldn't understand how someone who looks so healthy could seemingly just disappear. There were times when I remember I was gone for a good 2 months or so. But, you know, it's a constant game of catch-up, like I said. They just couldn't understand.
I have talked with people about sickle cell, and full disclosure, my father has sickle thalassemia, so this is obviously a topic of great interest to me. But when I talk with people, they don't realize, and as you said this, they don't get just how severe this can be. They don't necessarily understand the type of pain that can be felt when one has a sickle crisis. And those watching right now, I'm sure the first thing that they're thinking is, well, is there a cure? Dr. Noronha, is there a cure?
So there is a cure. If we were to do a bone marrow transplant on a patient with sickle cell disease, it can theoretically cure that disease. But right now, the best outcomes come from a transplant from a donor who is a fully matched brother or sister. And, you know, I've tested numerous families, and unfortunately, those brothers and sisters are not full matches.
And in terms of treatment options for symptoms, what is available?
So the best known treatment right now is hydroxyurea. So we've had now decades of data, first in adults and then in children, about how it basically it encourages the production of what's known as fetal hemoglobin, or hemoglobin that babies before they are born primarily produce, but after birth that production goes down. So hydroxyurea actually harnesses that ability again, and that hemoglobin works much better than sickle hemoglobin. And so people who take it, people who have severe sickle cell disease are the ones who typically are offered that medication, will experience much lower frequency of pain crises. And there's a very dangerous complication of sickle cell called acute chest syndrome, which is a severe type of pneumonia. Hydroxyurea will also decrease the rates of that complication.
Simone, I want to tie you into this. We heard Lloyd explain some of the challenges, and he says it's a give or take in school and in growing up. As a family, how do you work through and around this?
Just a lot of advocating. I mean, like from the first day of school, trying to meet with doctors, liaisons, teachers, nurses, making sure they're aware without Lloyd being exposed, because the kids do want their confidentiality, and you know, they don't want all their friends to know sometimes. And educating the staff and the people around them makes a huge difference, making them aware what to look for, signs, symptoms. As far as family, it's been difficult at times. You know, I've honestly have lost jobs, you know, because I've had to take off. You know, my theory is, you know, this is my purpose, this is my child. So, I mean, basically, some of my jobs, you have the FMLA, you know, you try to protect yourself and your family. As a family, we all deal with it together. When Lloyd needs us, we're there. And we deal with it one day at a time, and whatever comes forth, we just take the best of it.
Earlier this week, I interviewed Keisha Little for this program. She is a sickle cell survivor and also an advocate. I interviewed her at Unity Hospital. That's where she has predominantly been for the past 2 months, dealing with complications. And she told me when she was very young, her mother was told Keisha would not survive past the age of 14. Next month, she'll be turning 36 years old. Here is a small portion of my interview with Keisha from earlier this week. So take a look.
As a child, I did not want anyone to know that I was suffering with this disease, because I felt that it was taboo. Even as an adult, like even as an early adult, I was a little bit afraid to even tell when I got into the workforce my supervisors that I had this, because I did not want them to fire me because I would have to take days off, or maybe they just did not understand. And so I came to a point where I said, you know what? I'm not gonna live like this any longer. I cannot live in secrecy, because there is someone out there that's dealing with the same thing, and I want to be that voice for them if they can't be it for themselves. I know I stayed with my pediatrician until I had to get kicked out. So I believe I think it was either 18 or 21. I'm not really for sure. But I was the oldest one sitting in the waiting room, and I had no care in the world because I had such a wonderful pediatrician, and it was so hard to find an adult hematologist that actually knew and could pretty much help me and speak to my needs. There has been times when I had just a family medicine practice doctor where he knew nothing, and he really did not know anything about sickle cell, and I pretty much was educating him on the disease. And when I experienced that, I said, okay, I have to find a hematologist. I have to. I would definitely love to clear up some myths that have been associated with sickle cell disease. And when we're in a crisis, we're not coming to the hospital just to seek out drugs or seek out, the narcotics here. We are here to get medicated just because of the pain that we're going through. I feel like I can't even describe what the pain feels like because it's so excruciating. And sometimes what I can describe the pain as if someone took a jackhammer and just began to pound on your joints or begin to pound on any area of your body, and it doesn't stop. I try to manage it at home for as long as I possibly can before I actually come to the hospital. The hospital is my last resort. With Rock City Sicklers, we have a collaborative team of social workers, of doctors, and we also work with various organizations in the community, such as CURE, Childhood Cancer Association, and we have various activities that we do as a group. And so it's not just sitting in a room, every single week or every single month, just going around and sharing and telling stories. We try to incorporate fun things, and we try to incorporate ourselves within the community so that the community could also know what Rock City Sicklers stand for. We are warriors and we are survivors. And so this disease is not going to take us out, where the disease is not going to conquer us. It's not a death sentence, and you are going to survive, and you can function, you can work, you can do whatever you want to do. You can travel, you can, there are stipulations with that. Some people may, not be able to work, or because going in and out of the hospital, or they can only work part-time, or they can only work per diem, but don't let it stop you. Don't allow this disease to define you.
Dr. Noronha, you're part of a statewide coalition working to get a bill reintroduced in the state legislature with focus on many things, but predominantly the development of sickle cell disease demonstration programs throughout New York. Talk about why you believe this is imperative, and also how this can help address this gap that Keisha mentioned when it comes to services for adults fighting sickle cell disease.
So if I may, I just want to draw a very brief comparison between sickle cell disease and a very similar genetic disease called cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis has gone through so many wonderful advances of treatment because they are so well funded. There are many private donors, and there was a study published a while ago that revealed that there's 6 times as much funding for cystic fibrosis in this country as opposed to sickle cell disease. And I don't know all of the reasons, but you know, I think that we need to close that gap. And there are many ways and many areas that we need to improve with regards to sickle cell care. And so this state bill will hopefully fund at least 8 treatment centers and demonstration projects around the state, and I'm hoping at least 1 or 2 in upstate New York, because we have quite a population of people with sickle cell disease in this area. And what I hope it would do is, 1, allow us to really focus on improving quality of care. And the divide between pediatric care and adult care arose because we've had such great advances in the pediatric phase of care that so many patients are now survivors, and that leaves you know, adult primary care physicians and adult hematologists a little bit unprepared because they really haven't, you know, been aware that these kids can survive. And so one project that we have in Rochester right now, which is helping to close that gap, is the Complex Care Center. And that is a primary care comprehensive clinic for all survivors of childhood chronic illnesses, including sickle cell disease. And the medical director there is Dr. Pulsino, with whom I work very closely. And that's one example of an initiative that I hope will improve quality of care for these folks.
Lloyd, I want to ask you, what are your hopes as you transition? I think anyone, you're 18 and you're moving, everyone looks forward to hitting those adulthood years. What are the things that you hope to do? And the things that you would say, you know, I will not be defined by this, and I will make sure that I pursue my passions and my dreams. What are those things that you want to pursue?
I want to go into the field of graphic design, and I'm not entirely sure yet. I'm still deciding, but rather it be comics or game design or drawing company logos, anything around that I'd like to pursue.
And Mom, as he does this, do you have any concerns moving forward as he transitions into that adulthood?
One of my main concerns, which by the grace of God we have wonderful doctors, is his transitioning. It's kind of difficult at times, him being 18 and leaving peds, and it's scary as a parent. I just want him to have all the supports he can have, you know, through college. And like I said, a lot of education, you know, making sure they know what it is, basically working ahead of time. So if the situation arrives, we know that he has the backup. And as far as Lloyd, he's wonderful. You know, I know he can do whatever his mind sets him to.
Yeah, we have to close for now. We are out of time, and we could keep going, but I'd like to thank all of my guests for your time today and for your work in educating others and advocating for those with sickle cell. You should know September is National Sickle Cell Awareness Month. So to learn more or to get involved with the local group Rock City Sicklers, it's a support group and an advocacy group, be sure to check out their Facebook page. Just type Rock City Sicklers in the search engine at facebook.com. You can also call the group directly at 585-275-0798. The group's email address is also on your screen. We recently invited the new faces in the race for Rochester City School Board to the program. And we touched upon everything from poverty and equity to race and cultural competency. The candidates shared their ideas on how to help students excel academically and personally while in a district working to address its share of challenges. And tonight, we'll hear from the incumbents in the race, current school board president Van White and current vice president of the school board, Cynthia Elliott. Now, you may know that there are currently 3 seats up for grabs on the board, with 6 candidates, all Democrats, seeking a position with the decision-making body of the Rochester school system. So to my guests, Van, Cynthia, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. So first, I want to know, you are what people would call seasoned school board members. So you have been on the board for more than a decade. You know the inner workings of the district. You have worked with superintendents that have come and gone. And I want to know, what is it that is making you say, I'm not done yet, I want more time, I have more work to do? And Cynthia, I will start with you.
Well, I think because I do have the experience working in the community. I've been in this community for 40 years or so, and I believe that I'm on the board because it's been a calling, it's missionary work for me, and so I want to continue this work. I want to continue because we need to make sure that we have an educated population. Invariably, we have kids who drop out of school, but then there are these negative social ills that tend to cause our children to be in poverty and those kinds of things. And so without an education, it's going to be difficult for them to be successful in this life, particularly in this technological age as well. The other thing is that I'm interested in, I think we have issues with our systems in the school district. While our children have come into our district with various issues to be addressed, I think that the system does not support our students.
And by systems you mean?
And by systems I mean, for example, and this has not happened lately, but it did when I first came on the board, if global studies was a required course, but it was offered in the summer. So that's one example of that. And then I just received an email this morning with regard to a child who is not in school yet, has not been placed. And so it is those kinds of systems I think that we need to ensure are effective and efficient. And I think if we can have those kinds of systems that are effective and efficient, that we're going to engender trust within our families and within our community. And we haven't done that as well as we should. And that's why I want to continue.
Man.
Well, you know, as the kids say, to keep it real, I have not finished the job. When I ran in 2007, actually I ran in 2006, and I got sworn in at Number 50 School, which was a school I attended when I was a child. I swore to myself, to my family, and most importantly, this community, that I would make a difference in what was happening in this district. At the time when I took that oath, only 39% of our kids graduated on time. So the first thing I want to make clear to those that are running, those that are interested, neither Commissioner Elliott or I were handed this silver plate and told, hey, this is a great school district. It's got a 95% graduation rate. When I took that oath, again, only 39% of our children graduated on time. We've made some progress. I would say considerable progress. We're at about 50% now. So that's pretty decent, but it's nothing to break out the wine and champagne bottles just yet. And I was raised by parents that told me, you know, you do a job and you do it well until the job gets done. Now, any number of one of us could have run for other elective office in the past. The school board was seen as sort of the stepping stone. But kudos to those of us who stay there until the job gets done. Now, we're not going to get to 75, 85%, probably my professional lifetime. But I got something in my head telling me that the job is not done. So I got to stay until the job gets closer to where it needs to be. And I want to add one other thing. The reason why I want to stick around is I wear this button, and this button talks about the things that I believe in. And I believe in our parents. I believe in our teachers. I believe in our community. So I believe that continued progress is possible.
Incumbents would generally run on their record. So by that, I want to ask each of you, what is one thing that you would say through the few terms that you have both served on the board, you can say with certainty, this is something that I implemented, and I know that it has made a difference among students, a difference within the district. What is that one thing, Cynthia?
Well, one of the things that I have helped to do, and it was passed while I was on sick leave, was that that teachers who work in the district must have some urban experience. While I wanted to have about 7 years of urban experience, because that's when I think there is a level of competency, the board actually approved it for 2 years. So that's one of the things that I'm proud of, because if you have teachers or principals who live in a suburb and have no experience with urban children, there's going to be a disconnect. And we see that already in our suspension rate. And so we have to ensure that we have teachers and other staff who work in the district who understand the children and the families that they're working with. I tend to believe that because we have a number of staff and teachers that don't understand where our children come from, that's where the disconnect is, and their ability to be able to manage the classroom and the ability to help them to succeed academically is questioned, I should say. Let me just put it that way.
Man, one thing.
Well, it's kind of tough to say because you don't know where exactly that one thing will take us because it's still relatively early. But I'd say my focus, almost like with racehorse blinders, on the graduation rate. And how I have done that is I've used specific accountability tools to get the administration at 131 West Broad Street, no matter who the superintendent is. And by the way, that 10-year graduation rate, that 10% graduation rate improvement came with 3 or 4 different superintendents. So the thing that I think I am most proud of is that through that improvement, and it's not where we need to be, let me repeat that, through that improvement, one thing has remained steady. And some people would say that's not a good thing. Some people would say it's a very good thing. It's the Board of Education. That improvement that we have seen, that 10%, that literally represents thousands of students, mothers, fathers, standing up there clapping really loud in June and August when their kids graduate. That 10%, what has remained consistent is the Board of Education's almost racehorse-like blinder, laser-like focus on improvement of the graduation rate and ELA and math scores.
When you look at the state of the city school district and through your respective careers, you talk to students, you talk to families, district staff, what is, and about the current state of the district, what is your #1 concern, your #1 priority that if reelected, you would say, this will be my first order of business, this is where I want to really focus on early on? And Cynthia, I'll give that to you.
The superintendent is talking about literacy. So I think literacy is the area that I'd like to focus on, because if we can get them to read early, then we have a chance of them succeeding in the rest of their academic career.
Before we close, Van?
I would say focus on those graduation rates because they're reflective of everything, including literacy. We know that a child's reading proficiency at 3rd grade predicts whether they will graduate on time. But if we focus on that graduation rate and everything that leads up to it, and the people that lead up to it, the parents, the teachers, the students, will be successful as a district.
All right, well, we are out of time, but thank you to both of you for making the time to be here today. And this is just a reminder for you, primary day is September 12th, so be sure to get to the polls before noon and 9 p.m. That's next Tuesday. And WXXI Radio will provide primary election coverage on AM 1370 in addition to online streaming at WXXInews.org, and that will start at 9 p.m. when the polls close. And also a brief programming note for you. WXXI did cover the Democratic mayoral primary debate earlier this evening on WXXI Radio. A podcast from that debate is available, and it's on our website. So just go to WXXInews.org. And that debate was sponsored by News 8 and the League of Women Voters. And that wraps up another edition of Need to Know, WXXI's news magazine. I'm your host, Helene Bianduti-Hofer. Thank you for joining me tonight and throughout the weekend. And I will see you next Thursday at 8 o'clock right here on WXXI TV.